Amen.
I saw a funny post on Facebook the other day that sums up our reality these days. It said, in case anybody was unclear, today is Blur's Day, the 60th of Marprelais. I've found it difficult to remember what day it is lately, mixing up Friday for Saturday and Tuesday for Monday. My routine has been blown to pieces. Life seems really out of sorts these days, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Life is upside down. You're working from home and feel lost in your work because you're not in your element or your classroom, office, or with your team. Maybe you have kids too, and you're having to figure out how to finish out this school year on top of everything else. Maybe you got laid off this week, and now you're faced with trying to figure out what to do now. It could be that you received a diagnosis. That's just another thing to pile on during a pandemic. Do you feel worried about your next grocery run? Or how family members are going to receive the care that they need, even when you're supposed to be socially distant? This whole crisis has left us all thinking things like, is this the new normal? Is this even real life right now, right? Colossians 3, verses 2 and 3 says this, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. The Message version of the Bible says it like this, puts it in simple terms for a guy like me. Don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with the things right in front of you. Look up and be alert to what is going on around Christ. That's where the action is. See things from His perspective. Your old life is dead. Your new life, which is your real life, even though invisible to spectators, is with Christ in God. He is your life. God has given us new life through Jesus. That's why we celebrated Easter, that He died and was resurrected so that we could live through Him. And the author of Colossians says it perfectly. Through Jesus, we live our real life. I don't know what your focus has been on lately. It's possible that you've been consumed by the news, and you check in at least every night for what the task force briefing is. Your thoughts may be held hostage right now to anxiety and worry because of the unknown in our world. Maybe you're not thinking anything because you're exhausted from trying to work from home and homeschool your kids, and by the end of the day, you just want to turn off your mind. And maybe you're trying to do everything you can to keep yourself occupied and distracted. I don't know, binge watching Netflix shows, one after the other, waiting for the next Tiger King. Think about it for a moment. Where is your focus? And where does God fit into that picture? I believe that right now is the time to focus on the things of heaven. Because for the Christian, your real life is no longer lived out by the ebbs and flows, ups and downs of this world. Real life is lived through Jesus Christ. That's what this series, #Real, is all about. It's taking time to stop and think about your life. Who is God, and how is He changing my life? Each week in this series, we will have the privilege of hearing a personal testimony from members of our church. These are real life stories of people who have received and are living their real life through Jesus Christ. This morning, I'm pleased to introduce our first real life story. from a man who at one point in his life had to refocus his perspective, but now is living his real life. And he's a first-time elder of our church. His name, Mr. Angelo Bravo.
Good morning, Crosspoint. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Wendy.
Hello.
And hello, Angelo Bravo.
Hey, Angelo.
Good morning, Crosspoint. Good morning. How you all doing this morning?
Terrific. It's so good to have you here. Listen, I've known you for quite a while now, and I've heard some of your testimony before, and it is just amazing to me, some of the places you've been in your faith journey, and I know it's going to be an encouragement to others as well. And I want to begin with just a couple of quick things. How long have you been at Crosspoint now?
I've been with Crosspoint almost 8 years now.
8 years. Okay. Gosh, it seems like
eight wonderful years.
Oh,
Like it was
thank you. How nice. I'll send you the check in the mail's coming. And so
Great.
when I first met you, it was quite a story, and just fell in love with you and Mary right off the bat. I wonder if you'd tell us some of your early life and what it was like for you.
Yeah. So in my early life, you know, I have 2 kids and from a previous marriage, and you know, I was doing all the right things. I was going through the motions. I was going to church. I was in the Baptist church. I was actually a deacon in a Baptist church. And, you know, I thought all the right things. And I got deployed to Iraq, and I came back, and we started having some marital problems. And I was telling my wife, you know, hey, we're gonna be deployed again. And, you know, it just went downhill real quick.
Yeah.
And, you know, I started having problems with my marriage. I started having problems with my kids. One of my kids has come out. He's transgender, so I call her she now, because it just helps me, because she gets very offended when I don't address her in the right way. So, you know, I'm trying to make amends with her and pray for her daily. So, you know, when I was going to go to Afghanistan, you know, the marriage just fell apart. You know, I was going through a divorce at that time. So, you know, when I was in Afghanistan, I kind of wanted to end my life, you know, because I have my transgender son. You know, my daughter disowned me. We finally went through a divorce. You know, I was by myself, and I just didn't have anything going on for myself, you know. Father passed away, so it was just, you know, it's just a really hard time. And so I said, you know, I'll just volunteer for all the rough missions, put myself on the line, and hopefully, you know, I'd lose my life.
What does a rough mission look like? What kind of things were you volunteering to do?
Well, for instance, like anytime we had to go out and clear a road, or clear a defense or a line, or let's say we had to clear a route. I volunteered to live with the Afghans border patrol. So we were in a remote place. You know, we had only a few guys with us. So we were teaching the Afghans to do border patrols and things like that. So we were constantly in fights and firefights. The Taliban knew that we were there. So, you know, they wanted to get us. And they even tried to bribe the border patrol in order to kill us, to get rid of us.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, we were in a pretty tight spots. So, but, you know, God had another plan for me. He had some more work for me to do, because every time I tried to get, you know, killed, or I even got hit by an IED in our truck, you know, and I was on the gunner's hatch. You know, I should have been dead. And you know, all I did was lose some hearing. No big deal. So, you know, God had another plan for me, a bigger plan for me. And I didn't know what it was, and I don't know what it is. And it may be to come, but he has bigger plans for me. And so, you know, I started at a time when I was gung-ho and angry and wanted to take my life, to, you know, maybe this might be something different. So I started to think about that, you know. And then one night I was doing a security for our base, or for a little area. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. There was some dew on a farmer's field that I was looking over. I just kind of said, well, coming to the end of my tour, God, and my plan of taking my life is not working, so I'm going to give it back over to you. So I felt like the prodigal son coming back. I begged him to take me back, and I apologized, and I fell on my knees, and I prayed, and something just calm just came over me. And
Wow.
I changed my attitude by then. I said, I want to get back. So I volunteered for any mission going back home. They said, hey, Angelo, we need you to go and secure our place so that we can muster it up and get ready to go home. Would you go ahead of us and get that ready? I go, oh, absolutely.
You're ready.
All right.
I'll get you ready.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I went home. But, some of that stuff still followed me, even when I went to Crosspoint. I took a lot of lives, and that bothered me because those were fathers and sons of other people. And, that's something I'm going to have to answer when I get up there, and apologize when I get up there.
So what was your transition like when you got home?
It was a little rough. I still had to find my way and get more involved with God, and the greatest thing was that I met Mary. So I'm thinking that that's probably one of the things He wanted me to because she was praying for somebody to come in her life. I feel like I was her one.
Wow.
And I was growing very close to God, and and I got her to be more close to God as well. And so we kind of grow together, and very grateful and thankful for Crosspoint for getting us there and helping us stay on that path.
What would you want people that are listening to your testimony this morning to really hear from you?
Just because you give up, God doesn't give up on you.
Mm.
Wow.
All right, He's there. He will always be there. Even though I turned my back on Him, He was there for me. He was ready, and He knew where I needed to be. So don't think that whatever storms in your life, keep your faith in God and try to stay focused on Him. He will help you get through it.
Tell me how you and Mary met.
We met on a dating site. It's called Zoosk. So I was on a free trial, and I was doing a little bit of the dating thing, because I was lonely. I still had I didn't have my kids hasn't come around yet when I got back from the tour, so I was lonely. I sent her a message, a wink, and she didn't respond for like 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So finally on the way, I took a road trip to go see my Maya, my son, who's a transgender. So I took a road trip to go see him in Arizona, and during that trip, she finally reached out to me and sent me a message. So
Beautiful.
We talked. In fact, we talked for about 4 months before we even met.
Wow.
For about a month, we were talking before we even met. So.
Well, Angelo, I'm so pleased with how you have just engaged with the church at such a level. I mean, now you're a deacon in the church. Who would have thunk it, right? And I think of Mary. She volunteers in the church every Friday. She's at the church answering phones, and you guys are willing and ready, able to do so many things in the church. And I just wonder if there's something about that you'd like to share with other people about being involved.
Absolutely. I mean, being involved. If you're not involved, you're missing so much. It's great. You come, you'll see a couple of people during the 11 o'clock service, but without being involved, you're missing that connection, that third triangle piece, that third angle. You're a part of the church. Yeah, you come to the service, but that third part, being a part of it, just makes you grow.
No doubt.
And makes you be involved, and you just learn so much more.
Well, and right during this time right now when it's so hard to stay connected with people, I think we're realizing how important it was that we were doing that before.
Right.
So we're in this Jesus plus one. Do you have a one you're praying for?
I do. I have my cousin. He's a lot older than me. He's like 67. He lives in Florida. He's like a dad to me. He knew my dad very well. They were best friends. He was, my dad's first cousin. He's my second cousin, but Lewis is my one. We talked a little bit about faith when he's up here. I don't get to see him much when he's up here, but he hit me one night. He goes, I wish I had the faith you have. And I go,
Right.
We can have that. I go, let me help you. And he's just very resistant at this time, but I think he's coming around. So I'm praying for him.
Angelo, I think you've told me before you've got a favorite verse as well. What's your favorite verse of scripture?
My favorite verse is in Matthew 20:28. It's the Great Commission.
Oh, beautiful.
Because, that's what I feel God has in line for me. I told my elder group one time when we were doing some elder study, he goes, I said, when rapture comes, I hope I get to stay back. And they looked at me and they go, what? I go, yeah, because somebody's got to teach them how to find God and how to find Jesus. And I'll go. I'll be there. It's just I'll be there a little later. I'd rather do that work for him.
Very powerful.
So that's my commission. He worked for me, so I want to work for him. So yeah, I would like to read it for you if I can.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, Matthew. I'll start at 16. And then the 11 disciples went to the Galilee and the mountain where Jesus had told them to go, and they saw him and they worshipped him. But some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all the authorities of heaven and on earth be given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And my favorite is verse 20. Then teach them to obey everything I have commanded, and I will be with you always, and every end of the age.
Beautiful. To the end of the age.
Perfect.
Listen, I know you're living that out. I know we're trying to live it out as a church, and you do so well in your own life, and you make an example to everybody else as well. And so thank you for your testimony this morning.
Thanks for sharing.
Bless you, Angelo.
Thanks for letting me share. God bless you all. Love you all. Love you, Crosspoint. Mwah.
What an amazing real life story from Angelo. I appreciate so much his willingness to be transparent and vulnerable to all of us watching today. Did you catch on to the timeline in his story? He was close to God early on, but as time went on, life became difficult, and he turned away from God. It doesn't get any more real than that. Angelo has experienced what so many experience every day. And when life gets hard, turning your back on God gets easy. I'm reminded of another man's story whose experience was similar to Angelo's. In 1 Kings 18 and 19, we read the story of a man named Elijah. You might recall this story as your preacher recently shared this story with you just a few weeks ago, but I want to highlight it again. Elijah was a prophet in Israel. During this time, God was using Elijah to weed out the morally and spiritually corrupt, this leadership of his country. For 3 years, God sent a drought on the land that would push the Israelite economy and welfare to the brink of collapse. But God took care of Elijah. And Elijah trusted God. At the end of the drought, Elijah told the king of Israel that rain was coming. And in faith, Elijah went to the top of Mount Carmel and began to pray that God would send the rain. 7 times Elijah prayed and looked for the rain. And finally, a cloud raised up over the horizon and began to grow. At the sight of the cloud, Elijah jumped up, tucked in his cloak, and ran, literally, with God's speed to a place called Jezreel. But when he got there, he was met with hostility. The king's wife, Queen Jezebel, worshipped false gods and introduced idolatry to the kingdom of Israel. And she was angry with Elijah and sent word that even if it killed her, she was going to take Elijah's life before the sun set the next day. And news of this threat scared the socks off of Elijah. I mean, he probably wasn't wearing socks to begin with, but he was so frightened that he immediately fled for his life. And God led him on a 40-day journey to Mount Sinai. And when he arrived, God asked him, "Elijah, why are you here?" That's a valid question. One that God has the right to ask all of us. He may not need to ask the question, because after all, he's God. God knows everything about his children. And he knows it most often before we know it about ourselves. He may not need to ask, but he wants to ask. He may not need to hear the answer, but he knows that more often than not, we need to hear the answer ourselves. Why are you here? Maybe your answer sounds a lot like Elijah's answer. God, do you remember the good times we used to have? Do you remember how I used to have so much joy in life? Do you remember the way we used to connect and I loved being around you? You used to make everything work out for me. Romans 8:28 used to be my favorite verse. You work all things out for the good of those who love God. Why did the good stop? Why did I lose my job? Why is this cancer wrecking my family? Why have my children run so far away from you? God, when did everything go wrong in my marriage? Why have you allowed this virus to disrupt our lives? Why, God, did you take my mom from this earth so soon? Why is the Queen of Israel trying to kill me? Me, of all people. And God listened to Elijah. He always does. He may not need to hear the answer, but he always wants to hear his children. And being the perfect parent that he is, God answered Elijah. As his prophet sat in a cave in the side of the mountain, suddenly a great windstorm blew over the mountain. It was violent, and it was so strong that boulders came loose and tumbled down the rock face. And Elijah had to hold on to his cloak, right, to keep it from flying off. But God was not in the wind. After the wind came a strong earthquake. This terrible natural disaster shook the mountain, and Elijah had to brace himself in the cave. But God was not in the earthquake. Third came a raging fire. And Elijah watched as this dangerous wildfire raged rampant across the mountain. But God was not in the fire. As his heart rate began to slow down and his adrenaline wore off, Elijah heard the sound of a gentle, loving, reassuring whisper. The whisper said, "Why are you here?" God was in the whisper. He spoke to his child in a gentle, loving, reassuring voice. And he reminds us that just because you give up, he does not give up on you. Have you cried out to God lately? Have you been blatantly honest about how you feel right now? If not, What's stopping you? He is God, our Father, and He wants to hear from you. You might be surprised how He responds. It might not be in a great windstorm or earthquake or fire, but it may be a gentle whisper as you gaze at the morning dew that rests on the farmer's land in the middle of Afghanistan. And that is when real life began again. If you are looking to begin your real life, I invite you to connect with a church leader today. Here's how. If you're watching from our website, you can look down in the bottom right corner of the screen and click the button that says Live Prayer. When you do, you'll be connected with a staff member momentarily in a virtual chat room right there on your computer. If you're watching from Facebook or YouTube, you can pick up your cell phone and text the word prayer to the number that you see at the bottom of the screen right now. Once we've received your text message, a member of the Crosspoint leadership team will contact you by phone call to pray and to talk with you today. Colossians 3, 2 and 3. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God.